He looked like someone's grandfather, frail, polite, soft-spoken, the kind of man you'd pass on the street without a second glance. But Albert Fish was no ordinary old man. Beneath the gray suit and hollow eyes lived a predator of unspeakable horror, a sadist, a cannibal, and a self-proclaimed servant of God's wrath. He didn't just kill children. He wrote about cooking them, eating them, punishing them in the name of salvation. They called him many things: the Gray Man, the Boogeyman, the Brooklyn Vampire. But none of them captured the true nightmare that was Albert Fish. This is not just a story of murder, it's a descent into the darkest corners of the human soul. In the chilling archive of human depravity, few names strike a deeper, more guttural note of revulsion than Albert Fish. A man whose very existence blurs the line between mental illness and pure evil. To call him a monster is almost merciful. Monsters are at least fictional. Albert Fish was real. He was born Hamilton Howard Fish in Washington, D.C. in 1870, the child of a broken bloodline soaked in mental illness, death, and delusion. By the time he was 5, his father was dead and his mother had abandoned him to a state-run orphanage. It was there that Fish claimed the beatings he endured awoke something inside him: pleasure and pain. He wasn't merely hardened by trauma. He was rewired by it. By adulthood, Fish had become a transient predator, drifting from job to job, city to city, always keeping his true identity just below the surface. On the outside, he was harmless. A frail, gray-haired man with soft features and a quiet voice. But on the inside, he was a volcano of sadistic fantasies and cannibalistic hunger. He claimed to hear voices. He claimed God told him to inflict pain on others, to sacrifice children, to punish the world like a biblical prophet with a taste for flesh. The letters, windows into madness. Fish didn't just kill, he wrote about it, with a kind of poetic madness that chills the spine. In one infamous letter, mailed to the mother of Grace Budd, a 10-year-old girl he abducted in 1928, Fish detailed how he strangled her, dismembered her body, and cooked parts of her on a stove. He described in graphic culinary detail how he slow-roasted her buttocks and made stew from her heart and liver. He ended the letter by claiming it was not done out of lust, but for discipline. He wanted to purify her soul. The letter was unsigned but bore a distinctive watermark. That small detail, combined with the type of envelope used, led detectives to a boarding house where Albert Fish had briefly stayed under an alias. In 1934, 6 years after Grace Budd disappeared, police finally closed in. When apprehended, Fish was surprisingly calm. He confessed not just to Grace's murder, but to others. At least 2 confirmed child murders and possibly dozens more. He claimed to have killed and eaten children in multiple states, often describing how he would target those whose families were poor, weak, or grieving. What made Fish truly terrifying wasn't just his body count, it was his rituals. He inserted needles into his own pelvis and abdomen, dozens of them, which X-rays would later reveal embedded deep in his body. He flogged himself with cat-o'-nine tails. He stuffed cotton soaked in alcohol into his anus and set it on fire. These weren't just acts of self-punishment. They were spiritual to him, a fusion of religious ecstasy and sexual torment. Courtroom of the Damned. At trial, Fish's defense claimed he was insane. And how could he not be? A man who believed God had ordained him to kidnap, kill, and eat children. A man who mutilated his own genitals and rejoiced in electrocution fantasies. But the jury didn't see madness. They saw malice. Fish knew what he was doing. He hid his crimes. He calculated them. He even showed remorse. Not because he felt guilt, but because he feared being caught. The jury found him sane and guilty. His death sentence was confirmed. The execution. On January 16, 1936, Fish was executed in Sing Sing Prison's electric chair. According to reports, he welcomed the chair, telling guards, "It will be the supreme thrill, now the only one I haven't tried." Legend claims the first jolt short-circuited due to the needle still embedded in his groin. Though this remains unconfirmed, what is certain is that when the switch was pulled again, the world finally rid itself of Albert Fish. But the damage was already done. Legacy of a nightmare. Albert Fish wasn't just a killer. He was a walking embodiment of America's darkest fears: the corrupting of innocence, the predator in the shadows, the grandfatherly figure who turns out to be the devil himself. His case remains one of the most disturbing in U.S. criminal history, not because of body count, but because of the horror wrapped in normalcy. Because Albert Fish didn't look like a killer. He looked like someone who would offer your child candy on a Sunday afternoon. He wasn't the boogeyman we imagined. He was worse. He was real.